Most people who decide to take a month off alcohol expect to feel better. They expect to sleep more soundly, lose a little weight, feel clearer in the morning. Some of these things happen, but the full picture of what actually occurs in the brain and body during 30 days without alcohol is considerably more interesting, more counterintuitive, and in some ways more unsettling than most people anticipate. Because alcohol does not just affect how you feel in the hours after you drink it. It changes the architecture of your brain. And understanding what happens when you stop, what actually changes, and when and why, tells you something important about what alcohol was doing to you all along. Start with the first 24 hours. If you're a regular drinker, not necessarily a heavy drinker, just someone who drinks consistently, a few drinks most nights, a pattern that millions of Americans would recognize as normal. The first hours without alcohol are not neutral. Alcohol is a central nervous system depressant. It works primarily by enhancing the effect of GABA, the brain's main inhibitory neurotransmitter, while suppressing glutamate, the brain's main excitatory neurotransmitter. The result is the familiar effect of alcohol: the loosening, the slowing, the warmth, the reduction of anxiety. What most people do not realize is that the brain adapts to this chemical environment. When alcohol is present regularly, the brain compensates by reducing its own GABA activity and increasing its glutamate activity, trying to restore its baseline level of function. It recalibrates around the presence of alcohol. When you stop drinking, the alcohol leaves, but the brain's compensatory adjustments remain. Temporarily, the brain is now running hotter than it should be, more glutamate activity, less GABA inhibition. This is why the first 24 to 72 hours without alcohol for a regular drinker can feel edgier, more anxious, more restless than baseline. The nervous system is recalibrating again, this time upward, back toward its natural equilibrium. For heavy dependent drinkers, this rebound can be medically dangerous. Seizures and severe withdrawal are real risks that require medical supervision. For moderate regular drinkers, it manifests as irritability, difficulty sleeping, and a low-grade sense of unease that is easy to mistake for evidence that you needed the alcohol to feel normal. You did not need the alcohol to feel normal. The alcohol created the conditions that make its absence feel abnormal. By the end of the first week, the most acute phase of physical adjustment is typically complete for moderate drinkers. Sleep begins to improve, not immediately and not perfectly, but measurably. Alcohol significantly disrupts REM sleep, the stage of sleep associated with emotional processing, memory consolidation, and cognitive restoration. It may help you fall asleep faster, but it suppresses the most restorative phases of sleep, which is why so many drinkers wake at 3 a.m. in a state of anxiety and restlessness. As alcohol leaves the system, REM sleep begins to recover. Dreams often become more vivid and intense during this period. The brain is catching up on REM it was suppressing. By the end of week 1, liver enzymes that have been elevated by regular alcohol consumption typically begin returning toward normal. Inflammation markers begin to drop. Blood pressure, which alcohol elevates, typically begins to decrease. The immune system, chronically suppressed by regular alcohol use, begins to recover its function. These are things you cannot feel directly, but they are happening. The second week is where many people begin to notice cognitive changes. Alcohol affects the prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for executive function, decision-making, impulse control, and working memory. Regular alcohol use impairs these functions even at moderate levels and even in the hours and days after drinking, not just while intoxicated. As the brain continues its recovery in week 2, many people report a subjective sense of clarity that surprises them. Thoughts feel cleaner. Decisions feel less effortful. The persistent low-grade cognitive fog that they had normalized and that they may not have noticed until it began to lift starts to clear. This is one of the most commonly reported and most surprising experiences of an alcohol-free month. The realization that what felt like baseline clarity was not actually baseline. It was clarity minus the ongoing effects of regular alcohol use. The actual baseline, experienced after 2 weeks without alcohol, often feels noticeably sharper. People who were not aware that alcohol was affecting their cognition become aware of it when their cognition improves. Week 2 also tends to bring changes in emotional regulation. Alcohol is commonly used to manage anxiety. It reduces the activation of the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, producing the familiar calming effect. But regular alcohol use disrupts the brain's natural anxiety regulation systems. It creates a cycle. Alcohol reduces anxiety in the short term. The brain adapts by increasing its anxiety baseline to compensate. The absence of alcohol produces heightened anxiety that feels like evidence that alcohol was needed, so more alcohol is consumed. During week 2 of abstinence, many people experience a temporary increase in anxiety as this cycle unwinds. This is not evidence that they cannot cope without alcohol. It is evidence that the alcohol had been artificially suppressing their anxiety baseline, and the brain is now finding its way back to its natural equilibrium. By weeks 3 and 4, the changes become more substantial and in some ways more surprising. A study published in the British Medical Journal in 2018 followed a group of moderate drinkers who participated in dry January and found significant reductions in insulin resistance, suggesting that even moderate regular alcohol use was impairing the body's ability to regulate blood sugar in ways that are not well understood by most drinkers. Cancer risk biomarkers related to alcohol consumption showed measurable reductions. Sleep quality, as measured by sleep trackers and self-report, continued to improve. Liver fat, which accumulates with regular alcohol use, showed measurable decreases. In the brain specifically, neuroimaging research has shown that gray matter volume, which decreases with regular alcohol use, begins to recover during periods of abstinence. This recovery is not complete after 30 days, and the degree of recovery depends on the degree and duration of prior alcohol use. But it begins. The brain's neuroplasticity, its capacity to reorganize and recover, is remarkable, and 30 days of abstinence is enough time for measurable structural changes to begin. Perhaps the most important thing that happens during 30 days without alcohol is not any specific physiological change, but a shift in the drinker's relationship with alcohol. Many people who take a month off drinking discover things they did not expect to discover. They discover that the social anxiety they thought required alcohol to manage was manageable without it. They discover that sleep without alcohol is qualitatively different. Not just longer, but deeper, more restorative. They discover that the first drink after 30 days does not feel the same as the drinks before. The threshold has shifted, the tolerance has dropped, and the effect is more pronounced, which is information about how elevated their tolerance had become. They also frequently discover that some of the things they were using alcohol to manage stress, boredom, social discomfort, anxiety, the difficulty of unwinding after a demanding day, were manageable by other means. Not easily, not immediately, but manageable. The month of abstinence functions as a kind of controlled experiment in which the variable of alcohol is removed and the underlying states it was masking become visible. Addiction medicine physician Sarah Wakeman at Massachusetts General Hospital has noted that one of the most valuable outcomes of a period of abstinence is the information it generates about the role alcohol is actually playing in a person's life. Is it social ritual, genuine relaxation, or is it something more compulsive, something that feels harder to step away from than expected? The 30 days makes the answer clearer than any amount of theorizing about it. There are things that 30 days without alcohol does not fix. It does not fully reverse the effects of heavy long-term alcohol use on the brain, liver, or cardiovascular system. It does not eliminate alcohol use disorder in people who have it. That requires sustained abstinence and typically professional support. It does not make the underlying states that alcohol was managing disappear. The anxiety is still there. The stress is still there. The difficulty of unwinding is still there. What it does is make these states visible, separate from the chemical modification of alcohol, addressable on their own terms. There is something worth understanding about what alcohol is and is not. Alcohol is the most widely used psychoactive substance in the world. It is legal, socially normalized, and deeply embedded in the rituals and social fabric of most cultures. It is also a known carcinogen at any level of consumption, a significant disruptor of sleep architecture, a suppressor of immune function, a contributor to inflammation, and a drug that creates neurological dependence in a meaningful proportion of people who use it regularly, at levels that many of those people do not recognize as dependence. None of this means that everyone who drinks should stop. It means that most people who drink regularly have a less accurate picture of what alcohol is doing to them than they believe they have. The 30 days without it is, among other things, a way of generating a more accurate picture, of meeting your brain without the chemical modification and discovering, as most people who do it discover, that the unmodified version is something worth knowing.